we are back after a long break with some viewer game analysis. And it is something that I offer to the patrons on the Palm Beach Chess Patreon, that if they send me their games, I'll very likely make a video. So if you'd like a video on one of your games, I keep it anonymous, keep it fair, keep names out of it, don't want anybody getting embarrassed. We're focusing on, in my opinion, mistakes that happen, room for improvement. And we've got a 1600 FIDE playing white and a talented junior player that is unrated playing black. Now let's dive right into this game. And we're going to get a London system. And not typically do you see London systems stem from one knight f3. And we'll see one of the reasons why. So say this early bishop f5 and bishop f4. Now, I had a game in the 2011 Alabama State Championship with international master Emory Tate, and I played c4, and he played an early bishop takes b1. And these are interesting positions, and I think that black jumped the gun a little bit with bishop f5, and it would have been better, depending upon the repertoire of the person playing white, to go more into this type of system, because it is the concept with early bishop moves of space left behind, and you can often play this move queen b3, and it's a bit annoying to deal with. And unless black is playing accurately here, he can find himself much worse quickly. Knight c6 being the best move. The pawn is poison, so we just simply take care of the knight jumping in, and now black's got to make a concession move like rook b8, and it's a bit of a substandard queen's gambit for black, where white just has natural moves and can build pressure. So back to the main game, we see after bishop f5, bishop f4. And this is a bit different. Black has a little bit more flexibility. So I've got a London system series on my Patreon channel where the most typical way this goes is knight f6 here. Now, this is where it's critical, this whole copycat concept, because there's a memory marker here. We discussed this in the previous video. For me, in my texts, the memory marker is that key moment that is going to define the position, the plan for you. And it's super critical in simple, dry positions like the London system that you must know your stuff. Otherwise, you will get no advantage with white. And black will equalize quite easily. So here, it's going to be the concept of breaking symmetry in a positive way. Bishop e2 is the first move. Well, say black's just going through his normal motions here. Sir, would you please like to trade and accelerate my development? No, I would not. Knight e5. Normally you see a move at this point like castles. Well, the point of bishop e2 and knight e5 was to be able to play g4. And after bishop g6, h4, we can already see that this is going to be frustrating and painful for the second player. This is the key plan for playing against this position, to be a bit annoying. So, of note. Now, for me, I'm going to say from a master's perspective, if I've got a lot of time, say it's a 90-30 game, like I believe that was the time control for this game, you've got to think in terms of how can I break symmetry, or how can I saddle my opponent with some sort of long-term weakness. If you don't make any sort of changes, you're just doing your setup, going through the motions, getting a structure. That's the danger of the London system. And here, there is definitely an opportunity here for white. Is black's jumping the gun a bit with c5, but white in the main game reacted with a typical London system move. Oh, c-pawn attacks my center, so I bolster the center. If you're a pause your video to figure stuff out type person, What's something more critical, more aggressive? What would you do with white? All right, hopefully you took a pause there. And why not get development with tempo? Bishop b5 check. And after knight d7, we got to watch out for potential queen a5 stuff. c4. I really like c4. Knight e5's ideas that are coming up. And after takes, you got this kind of position where long term, you're playing against an isolated pawn. So you need to be critical with looking for these types of options. c3, not so critical, and a lot of, say, that first move advantage. We got something by the engine saying when c5 was played, white had the better part of 7/10 of a pawn or so, and as soon as c3 is played, it's close to zeros. So knight c6. And then this next move is also in that vein, but if you knew the previous plan, potentially you still go after bishop e2, knight e5, and g4. I'm not a big fan of this next move either, bishop d3 immediately, because we're just trading pieces. And if you're trading pieces equally, and you do that the entire game, you're going to be left with kings, and it's going to be a draw. So my preference would be to try to create some sort of imbalance by going after this bishop. And I would make knight b d2, looking for an idea like knight f6, where I'm then going to go knight h4 to go after this bishop to try to capture it, to create an imbalance where I'll have the bishop pair and my opponent will not. You've got to look to create favorable imbalances to try to get something going. And you go, well, what if he plays bishop d6? Sure, fine. I can go d takes c5 to make him waste a tempo, or I'll just drop back. Because if you would like to trade, I'm in the very least going to get an open h-file, and I can go back to that knight h4 idea that was mentioned before. So look for ways to imbalance the position. Bishop d3 was played. You do get a little bit of time, but I do not think it's worth trading off the good bishop in the structure for the opponent's bad bishop. So knight f6, castles, and h3 was played. And it's another, we'll say, automatic London move. Why do we play h3? To preserve the bishop. But at the same time, I look at the position and I think, how can I create some semblance of an imbalance? I would potentially consider bishop g5 here, looking to capture that knight so I could play a pair of knights against a mismatch. Also, if I'm threatening bishop takes, I could potentially take there. So I've seen knee-jerk reactions in a lot of my students' games where black will often play this move c4. Oh, he's gaining time and tempo, and he's also ruining his pawn structure for the inevitable future. We simply go queen c2, and white has the ability to break on e4, and in the long term, that does nothing but leave this guy weak. And that is a very, very common mistake in these structures that I see. Say colors reversed, I see it against the Slav very frequently. So that would be an idea to try to create some sort of favorable imbalance. You got to focus on these things in simple positions. Again, I'm seeing a little bit of a passive move with h3, a6, and this next one, a4. I can't fault it too much, but at the same time, I'm looking for something active. And in this structure, e4 is going to be the critical move that's going to be needed to be played for a long time. So I'm strongly considering just playing rook a1 to bolster everything that's going on. This again encourages the eventual c4. If he goes b5, he's probably going to go c4, which is what we want. So if, say, something like b5 happens, I'm very much looking at the potential to capture and then go e4. And am I getting away with that there? Probably not. DE, knight E, if queen takes, knight takes f6 check in between. Yeah. So definitely this position looks good for white, and we kind of fixed all the opening problems. And this structure, e4 is going to be the breaking move. You see it a lot in the Kali system, and this is like an improved Kali system with a bishop on f4. But a4, I'd say stick with more of the plan, because what are we really preventing? Potential overextension in an endgame. Because we will be trading things. Rook e8. I put a question on that move as well, because black is not playing for e5 in the structure. So the rook would have been better suited to, say, be on d8, and I would be more comfortable looking for a move like queen b6, go ahead and eyeing the b pawn, and then follow with a move like rook d8. Rook e8, rook fe1, again, e4 at some point. Rook 81, starting to get there. And now, probably this is the moment where we're starting to look at d takes c5 and e4 again. Same sort of plan that was mentioned before. And if you miss the plan the first time, I can't really fault you too much for missing it in future moves. But at this point, it's kind of a dry position where moves are being made, but there's no strong concrete substance or plan going on. So when you have these types of positions where you get confused, stay solid. Queen b6, knight e5. So looking for something to do in the position. Probably if I'm playing white, I'm again looking at doing some sort of harassment of the knight on f6, bishop g3, followed by bishop h4. See if I can get some form of concession. But knight e5 trades another set of pieces equally. And this is the first actual mistake of the game, I would say, as it unnecessarily allows an imbalance. It may not be a good imbalance, but when you have an imbalance, you have something to play for. And here, black decided to play bishop d6. Much stronger is to play knight d7, saying if an imbalance is created, it's going to be on my terms, not yours. And after bishop f4, something like a5. And if you start making comparisons, I definitely prefer black, as black has the aggressive pawn structure, whereas the choice to alter it, the better placed queen, the better bishop, as the central pawn that's locked agrees with the bishop. So everything's going good there. Should roughly be equal still, but I got to point out those favorable imbalances when I can. Bishop d6 was played, and white takes the option to grab the knight, mess up the pawn structure, and now we're playing a knight versus bishop middle game, slash heading into an ending, as pieces are definitely going to drop as pawns get moved here. So, what are we playing for with both sides? Well, black is looking to open up the position favorably and keep pawns on both wings to favor the bishop. White is looking to lock down the position. And what we have here is a bad situation already for white, as the majority of the pawns in our structure are on the same color as the bishop, meaning they're targets. That's what makes this a good bishop. It's going to be very hard to liquidate all those or get them on light squares. So we start off with queen a2 here, and then king h8, and queen b3. I can't fault this too much, as over the last two moves said, okay, I have a queen that's on b1, you have a queen that's on b6. Passive place piece, active place piece. Would you like to trade that? I'd be cool with that trade if I was white. Black says, nah, that's okay. Now, white changes gears, knight f1, rook g8, and here f4 was played. And it does potentially, for the time being, shut things down, but I do feel like we've got to have something more critical here for white other than the immediate f4. And it brings me back to the plan that has been existing for white in this position from the start, and I look at e4, because for instance, in the meantime, if d takes e4 is played, d5 is quite strong, where notice how you get the queen trade that you were looking for earlier, and look at the pawn structure for black, as there's just a lot of targets, and white is much better here. I feel like most of the game, when white had an aggressive option to meet the aggression by the opponent, was typically looking to shut down play. A little bit too passive would be the overall critique of white's playing the game so far. Rook g7, looking to pile up on g2. So rook e2. Now knight h2. f5. Make sure e4 is not going to be played. That's something. Now white is potentially looking for a break. f6. Not too much to comment on. We're waiting for the action to really finally take place, because there's a lot of ways that the game could go. Now queen c2. And here it's a good moment for black to really take stock in the position. Because the move that he played is probably the beginning of the end. In the game, c takes d4 was played. Now, what actually should be played is c4. Now, c4 earlier was a mistake because white could play for e4. He no longer can. Where can the white knight jockey to post anywhere? It can't. So what is white supposed to be doing in this position? Waiting for black to open it up. When it opens it up, who does it favor? The bishop over the knight. Where are white's pawns? They're stuck on the same color as the bishop, and black has a clear plan for expansion and messing white up on the queen side. So it was the time for c4 in this ending. C takes d4 was played, and we go from white is objectively losing to white has a huge edge if e takes d4 was played. And the idea is there's a target on the e file. But c takes d4 was played. Now it's roughly equal. And this is why it's one of those things, as a coach, if you are watching your students' games live, I rarely ever want to watch, say if they're playing on the DGT board, I don't watch the games. Because just in the sequence of the past two moves, there's huge evaluation swings and a lot of, say, micro blunders or micro misunderstandings going on. So it's important to highlight these things. So c takes d4, rook c8, fighting over the c file. Takes, and every pawn has been moved by black at this point. So let's go ahead and make a target. And black seizes the opportunity to try to get rid of one of these pawns. But I think it's a bit premature, as black has full time to just slowly improve here. So king g7. And white's probably going to go for something like g4. That'll allow us to get rid of one of the double pawns for black. Now, c5 here, and I feel pretty good overall about the game being roughly equal at this point. I would definitely be more comfortable playing black in the position, but I would say definitely if I had this position in a tournament game, I would be satisfied to try to press with either color. So in the main game, c5 was played, and after takes, knight d4, takes. Now we have a pure knight versus bishop, but we still see the issues of the pawns being on the same color as the b. e5 was played. Now a5, good play by black. h5 doesn't ruin anything yet, but I would start bringing the king in. We have time for those moves like h5 later. Making some progress. b4. Now starting to get critical, because how are we going to handle this in the best way? Got to worry about the outside pass pawn in some situations, but I do feel it's better to capture now than to, say, play a move like bishop c7, because after b5, that's a protected pass pawn on the opposite color of the bishop forever. So captures, I believe, is the best decision. And now I have no idea what the time was for the game, but we do have simple threat, should have a simple defense. And after this next move, it goes from being zeros to white has a very, very big edge. So this pawn is not easily going to be ushered up the board, because we can simply play bishop c5 and cover the a7 square. So we look at something like king e6 and say if a5, bishop c5, and after a6, king d6, making sure we're covering the c6 square. And I mean, we can even play this move king d3, can't take the knight because the pawn will run. And it looks like with black, I can just chill, seemingly going back and forth, and it should objectively be a draw. White could overpress, and I'm pretty sure any pawn move for white is going to leave him in a worse scenario. So that's how black could have held the game. But d4 check was played. This was probably miscalculation. So what would you do with white? You know that white's better from my commentary. How do you prove it? If you're a pause the video type of person, now's your moment. All right, moving on. Most critical way to handle a check is aggressively. E takes d4. Here, there's definitely two ways the game could go. E takes f or E takes d. Probably if E takes f happened, we get something like this. And it's just easy to pick up the pawns. I really don't see too much of an issue for white here. The knight definitely overworks the bishop here. E takes d4 was played in the main game. Can't take the pawn because the knight would hang. And now, potentially, you got to look for your counter chances. And when you're down, we have this expression, never trade off your last rook. In this case, the only imbalance left in the position is the bishop. And black is clearly worse. You see that the king and pawn in game is lost. You know you got to do something to create chances. So what is the best option for black to potentially create some chances here? You need a pass pawn. Well, these guys are weaknesses. I would play h4 to try to move this pawn. After g takes h4, bishop takes f4. This is still an objectively losing position for black. Knight c2. Pawns are going to fall, and these guys aren't going anywhere. But point is, you need to at least find some squirming chances. You got to fight in some way. In the main game, bishop takes b4 was played, and now this heads directly into a lost king and pawn in game. Silman talks about this concept. We had a good series on the complete in-game course from beginner to master in the playlist, where in king and pawn in games, there's an outside pass pawn. The defending king will run after it. And as he is collecting that pawn, the attacking king will collect all the other pawns. So a5, and we see that in motion here. And white wins the game. And thank you, I should say, to our contributor who submitted this game. Hopefully it was instructive for you and for others. Until next time.